Hello everyone, today I'll be showing you how to build a hexagon shelf out of some pine and then also use some 3D printed gizmos to help make it. So first we'll start out with 2 pieces of pine here. We'll take one of the boards and we'll set it down. That's because you only need one of the boards for the job. So I start off by cutting the board to 58 inches. If you guys do it, cut it to 60, as we'll find out later I messed up. So for the hexagon shelf you need 6 pieces, and each of my pieces, the inside length was 9 inches. So 9 times 6 equals 54, and then I added some extra because there was going to be angled ends. So cut to 60. So I cut off the extra, then squared the one end of the board. And then I like my board a little bit thinner than the standard 3/4 inch 1x4. So I cut it down to 11/16 inches. I just like it a little bit thinner. It looks a little bit better to me. And then if you get your own planer, you too can have a happy snow day down in the shop. After I planed the board, I went ahead and took my table saw and I cut the one edge of the board to give me a nice straight cut on the one side. And then after I cut it, I set the width to 3 1/4 inches. That'll be the depth of my shelf. And then I ripped the board down to that. So now my board is planed and it is ripped. So what I have here is a 3D printed kind of angular piece that I'll use to cut my 30-degree angles for the hexagon shelf. So I used Fusion 360, and this angle right here is a 90 degree. This one is a 60 degree. So if you have the 90 degree, come down 30 degrees, you have 60 degree. And then this one here, I didn't make it all the way to the point, but if you had 90 degrees, you come down 60 degrees to have your 30 degree. So this is the angle I want each of my corner pieces, each of the end pieces cut to, so that way that when they match up, you have 6 pieces. So there's a total of 12 ends. 12 times 30 is 360, and there's 360 degrees in the circle. And so that's how you get that. And it's pretty cool with Fusion 360. You can inlay, 60, 90, 30 degrees in these circles, where just to make it so that the way the print didn't take as long. So now I'll take my handy dandy 3D printed gizmo and I will set my miter saw to the 30 degrees mark. Give me a precise angle for all the corners to fit nice and tight when I glue it together. So what I do is I take the board and I plug in my miter saw to the power outlet socket. I need to run some more wiring. So anyways, I take my board and I cut my 30 degrees in to the one end of the board just to start that out. And then I will measure the length of my board, which will be 9 inches. And then I will take a clamp and a piece of wood to help create a little jig so that way each of my cuts are the same. So I'll get my length right and I will cut my board. So if it doesn't come out exactly to 9 inches like mine, it came out like 9 1/16, that's okay, because as long as all your cuts are the same, you will be fine. So when you lay your boards up against your fence, you want the long end of your board always against the fence. And after you cut each fence, you rotate it over so that way the long end is against the fence. And as you can see, because I cut my board too short to begin with, I came out short. So that extra piece I cut at the beginning, I ended up planing that and ripping that down and cutting that to give me my 6 pieces. Now I am moving on to cutting the slot for the hanger to hang the shelf. And as you can see, as usual, I struggle with simple tasks like measuring. So I finally think outside the box, grab a piece of wood to put the tape measure on, and now I can mark 4 1/2 inches, which is the halfway point for the 9 inch inside length of the shelf. So these brackets I just bought off Amazon. They're not heavy duty because the shelf won't hold much. So what I do is I put the center of that bracket on my halfway point mark, and then I will outline the bracket as I will router in a recess into this piece, so that way the bracket will sit flush with the outside of the piece and it'll make the whole shelf sit flush against the wall. So in order to router out the bracket spot, I had to take my board and clamp it up against the bigger board so that way I had a good base to put my router on. So once I got it squared up using a straight edge, I ran my router at a shallow depth just to get the shape right of my cutout. So then I'll take my bracket and I'll put it in to see if it's the right length, if it's the right width, and then I'll keep running my router in there until I have it the right size, and then after that I will lower my router down to the proper depth and then cut it out, and that'll give me a pretty good size. Now on this particular shelf I didn't do the best router job. I've done better in the past, but nobody will see it, so it's okay. And I'll go ahead and sand the pieces. So I'm just sanding the tops and bottoms. I'm not sanding the edges, as I will do that later. So I sand these with 120 and then 220 grit sandpaper. So now it comes time to gluing. What I have here is my boards, some paracord, and then my 3D printed brackets. So these are the first time I am trying these out. These match the outside for each corner, and it'll help snug it up and to hold it in place while I'm gluing. So I go ahead and lay out my boards, figure out how I want them orientated, see if there's any bad spots. I can put that either on the top or the bottom, and I take my paracord that's going to go around the shelf to tie it together. As I get my board set in place, I put my 3D printed brace parts around and I run my paracord around. And then what I'm going to do is tie a loop into each end that I will then use another piece of paracord to cinch it all together. After I tie my 2 knots, I realize that this is not long enough. And I do what anybody else will do and chuck it angrily over into the trash and grab a new piece that is definitely longer. No, I wasn't angry. I just realized it was too short. So for take 2, I cut a new piece and then I cut another piece of paracord that'll tie everything together. Now it comes time to the gluing. I'll go ahead and apply some wood glue to each end of the board, and then I'll take my finger and spread it around evenly. Good day in the world. Once I get the pieces pretty much set in place and make sure I have them set how I want, I'll go ahead and take my brackets and set it around. After I admire my work that could definitely be considered a Steinway piano of shelves, the 3D printed brackets I am so proud of, like a mother with a newborn child. So I run my paracord around and then I take the extra inner piece to tie the 2 together. And the nice thing about this is when I cinched them up, it did cause some squeeze out of some glue, but there was just enough wiggle room so that way I could move the bracket still to get it just the right on the corners. And I will say, of all the Hexagon shelves I made so far, this one turned out the best. And here's a nice GoPro close-up to show you, and my not Boy Scout approved knot. I don't know what the knot is, it worked, so that's what I went with. Now I'll go ahead and sand the ends just to make sure all my corners are nice and flush with each other. Finished with 220 grit sandpaper, and then I went ahead and just did the outside edges as well to make sure if there was any scuff marks that did find their way that they would be eliminated. Now before I paint this puppy here, I will go ahead and take my bracket and I will pre-drill the holes for the little screws. So this probably isn't necessary, but it does make it a whole lot easier later on to make sure you screw it down and it sets right where you want it to. So put it where I want, mark it with a pencil, and then I'll take my Dremel and I will drill out a pilot hole for each of these spots, as you will not see because I decided to put my hat right in the way. But you can probably imagine that I'm just drilling out a hole. Here I'm taking the bracket and I am showing you in the first person view that it fits. And again, this isn't the best cutout I've done, but it works. Nice and flush. This one was actually just a little bit not flush, but it was close enough. Now I'm going to go ahead and get ready and mix up some spare white paint that I had laying around that matched our walls while watching some disc golf on YouTube. Took it outside with my airless sprayer. Now it was really windy today and I think this affected the coverage, as it's hard to tell outside. I did multiple coats, 3 or 4 coats. It was drying really quick, but once I took it inside I realized it didn't cover as good as I thought. And I think it's because of the wind, it just was taking too much paint away. So I ended up having to go over it again with just a foam brush later on. But I do really like how the airless sprayer, how it leaves a finish on the shelf. And while that is drying, go ahead and throw in some chicken nuggets for lunch. Paint is dry, and now it's time to put on the shelf. Nice flush fit. Now it's time to hang it, and with the help of my wife to tell me right where she wants it. To hang this shelf, I just took a little like 1-inch nail, put in the drywall since there's not much weight. It was going to hang fine, and the shelf turned out pretty good. If you want to, if you had a router, you could put like a chamfer on the edges. That might give it a little more nice character to match your bathroom. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoy my work, I do have some other videos that you can check out on my channel. Thank you so much and have a great day.